since that was brought up. So,
who here has heard of that corn gluten meal? Some people? Yeah. UC does not recommend that. I mean, it's a fine fertilizer, but every test that we have run, and believe me, we've tried to make it work, it has not been a very good herbicide. Corn gluten meal is the active ingredient. They have a couple different names. I can't remember what the commercial names are, but yeah, it's promoted as an organic pre-emergent herbicide. And while it does have a minimum amount of pre-emergent control, it's mostly used for lawns and a little bit of landscape type. I mean, all of the tests that I've run, I've got maybe 40% control. And people say, oh my gosh, 40% control, that's great. 40% is almost statistically irrelevant. Okay, because remember, if you have 40% control, you have 60% not controlled. Okay, so just because it has a reduction in weeds, if you have like an untreated one and the one that you put the corn gluten meal on, and you see that it's reduced, the bottom line is that yes, there might be a difference in the untreated one and the one that's been treated, but functionally, it doesn't give you the amount of weed control that you need. Okay, so you probably get the same amount if you put an equivalent amount of sawdust in. Okay, and it's a lot cheaper. Okay, so, but as a fertilizer, it's actually a pretty good fertilizer. Yeah.
I don't mean to beat a dead horse or anything, but crabgrass, my most effective cure for crabgrass was pulling it out. And it didn't seem to me, or hasn't seemed to matter to me when I pull it out. And it seems that in the fall, when you can see it, you've got this big clump. If you pull it out, you get less of the, when the new little ones come out, you see them more easily. You've got this dead thing over the top of it that's left over. And ours grows for so long, especially in a mild winter, that I think advocating pulling it out whenever you see it.
No, that's absolutely fine. No, yeah, because if you wait too long, then the key is whenever you see it. So if you wait too long, then it gets to be a pretty good-sized clump, and it's much more difficult to pull out, even though it's shallow rooted. But when it's very small, before it has, what they call tillers, so it comes off the sides of tillers, so like 3 or 4 or 5 tillers, you can yank it out pretty easily. And if you're consistent with that, that will reduce the population quite a bit. But again, in the fall, sure, if you got the time, and if you see a big enough patch that like your whole yard is covered with it, it's probably not time. It's probably too time consuming to pull that out. But if you have sort of these localized patches, maybe a foot each, then yeah, sure, anytime you can do that. But just keep in mind that when you do that, there's still going to be a lot of seeds on the ground. And I recognize that what you're saying is that you think it grows year round, but the amount that might be grown through the winter is very minimal.
Yeah,
okay?
But it's covering the new stuff that can sprout really early in the season if it's warm.
Oh, if you have remaining, like residual crabgrass bodies, I guess, from last season, normally they disintegrate over time, so I'm wondering if you actually have crabgrass now.
No, I'm saying the new crabgrass plants that come up,
right?
They can come up really early in the season if the weather is warm.
Right.
And they can be hiding underneath this mass of dead one.
But that's what I'm saying is that typically you don't have a dead one from the previous year. It's such soft body that it usually disintegrates over time in the winter.
Only we have rain.
Rain? Rain?
Yeah,
That's it. I think I saw that once. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? To bring up? Okay. I'm just going to kind of burn through this, actually, just to kind of finish it up, and then we'll do a little bit of outside stuff. So, because I do find that this is kind of important to talk about this kind of mulch. So this is the fabric mulch you might have seen. It's sometimes called weed barrier or weed cloth. And I'm not sure if I can actually show you, maybe you can. Can you see that this doesn't have a weave to it? It's kind of like all mishmash of fiber. So that's really good because it's even for perennial weeds, and you can get this in different thicknesses. Sometimes you have to go to a specialty place to get the really thick stuff, but I've seen it in many of the big box groceries, hardware stores, and Costco, places like that. So you buy it in rolls. The rolls are usually about about 4 feet, by 50 feet or something. You can cut it up. But the beauty of this is that because it doesn't have a weave. Now remember how we saw that nutsedge grow through the plastic mulch? Right? It went through the plastic mulch because nutsedge sort of has a little point to its tip, and it can poke its way through plastic. But if it but since this is a little bit tougher, it has a higher tensile strength, it's more difficult for it to punch its way through, particularly because it doesn't have a weave. So here's something, and I'm not sure if this will show very well in here. I don't know, can you see that? So you see this has a weave to it? Now, it does have a felt backing, so that protects it a little bit more, but many times these don't have a felt backing. And so if a weed seed, whether it's perennial or not, happens to kind of find a weak part in the weave, it's much easier for it to push its way through. So we don't really advocate using this type of woven barrier. It's actually just called non-woven. So those are really good, and here's somebody using it, but you do have to cover it with a mulch, even though that mulch is used less for weed control and more just for protecting this from UV radiation, because this breaks down at night. So that's why you have to cover it. But it does a real good job of protecting, getting the weeds that might be emerging from the bottom. So if you have perennial weeds, this is something that's quite good. Now, but I do want to show you something. So this is you've got a new garden, okay? And you say, okay, I'm going to have 1 gallon pot here and a 1 gallon pot here and a 5 gallon pot here and just like that, whatever your design is. But you have a sort of a blank slate. Okay? So the canvas is completely blank. So you say, well, it's all flat. It would be just, why don't I just take this and I'll just take my big piece and I'll just put it down, right? And then I'll cut holes and then I'll put my plants in there. Okay? Does anybody know the problem with that? You got to cut because you have to dig a big hole, and it's very difficult to dig if you only have this much to work with. So obviously you're going to have a bigger hole than what you're going to cut in this. So the best thing to do is actually you plant first.
No.
Yes, you do. And then you might be able to see it in here, but you cut an X in here, and then you lay this down over those plants, and so you kind of have to lay it down first to kind of measure where it's going to go. So you lay it down, and then you pull the plants through the X, and then you put now you can put this right close up to this plant. Because any open spaces where weeds are going to exploit that. So you want to get this up as close to the base of the plant as you can. And you can't do that if you cut holes in there. Because you're just going to have that big open area. And then if you have a tree, let's say you're not going to pull this over a tree, right? Okay? But what you do is you cut a couple pieces and you just make a slit, okay? And then you bring it around the tree, bring the other side around the tree, and overlap the edges. So that's how you would use that. Works very well. Again, perennial things. You wouldn't use it in your annual garden or anything like that. It's too expensive. I've seen this now. I used to never see this. Somebody just gave this to me as first sample, but this is actually paper. And so it says 100% biodegradable. It probably does about the same as newspaper. Okay, but it's nice and flat. And so I actually have seen this in a couple places. I can't remember now off the top of my head, but it's something that you might want to consider as opposed to this kind of mulch, or more in the garden. So as a replacement maybe for plastic mulch. It's not so easy to use as plastic. It doesn't really fold or anything like that. But it is biodegradable. And at one time, and I know this is, like I said, kind of older, but I remember this actual sample does it. It's got fertilizer in it. So as it degrades, it releases some fertilizer as well. So anyway, just the idea, it's just a mechanical thing to suppress, a physical thing to suppress the weeds as they try and emerge from the ground. Okay, and we already kind of covered the plastic. I think I'm just going to do this one, and then I'll stop. Oh, I'll keep going until I get to another quiz. How's that?
Oh,
okay. Yeah, okay. Well, let's see what we do with that. Okay, so for cultural methods for weed control, right? So one of the issues we had with the weeds was that they were competitive, right? And so the situation is that let's say you're planting your vegetables by seeds, and you put them down in your row, and then you water, and what happens? Weeds come up, right? And often the weeds come up before your vegetables do, right? And so what happens is that the weeds end up shading out the vegetables, right? Okay, so that means the weeds are competing with light, for light. Okay, so they're taking most of it because they're covering up your vegetables. Your vegetables aren't going to be doing very well unless you remove those weeds. So what can you do to compensate for that?
If you know when the vegetables are going to come up, maybe just scrape them off very gently off the top. If you know that there's the other things are coming up like at the same time.
Okay, so what she says, if you know the vegetables are coming up, which I hope you know that because you planted them, right? So yeah, so you can scrape the weeds off as they're coming up. Okay, so that's one way.
You can, after, when you prepare the seedbed, water it, and then wait to plant after all the weeds have sprouted, then you remove them.
Remove the weeds, and you would use like one of those hoses. You don't want to. That's pretty much what she said. So you water it, wait. You says plant, irrigate, wait, and then you.
I'm saying don't.
Oh, you can't. Oh, you can do it both ways. Okay, so you're saying do that first, and then. Okay, so that's what's called a stale seed bed technique. It works quite well. Is that you prepare your seed bed, you know where you're going to plant. You water it. You're going to get a flush of weeds, right? Okay. What you do is when they're still small, you come in and you remove those weeds generally with something like this that doesn't disturb the soil very much. Because again, you want to just kill the weeds that are coming up. That's the first flush is usually the most weeds that you're going to get. Then, if you want to, you can do that a second time and sort of stimulate a second flush of weeds. And then after that, you can come in and plant your crop. And hopefully that will have reduced the amount of weeds that are coming up at the same time. So that's very good. That's a really good technique called stale seed bed. And you can also do it, you know, as you say, after you plant too. Okay, so you can plant and the weeds will come up, but the weeds will be coming up before your crop is, and you can still do a little bit of hoeing.
We use drip irrigation and plant just at the emitters.
I'm sorry?
You use drip irrigation, just plant at the emitters.
Plant at the emitters, yeah. So that'll do some, but you'll still get some weeds there. But that's a good way. Yeah, you do like they always say, weeds grow where water flows, right? So yeah, so that's a good way. What about if we're talking about competition? How about using transplants instead of seeds? Right? Okay, so that's another way that you get. No, but I'm saying when you can. Right, so you get tomatoes. The tomatoes are great, actually, because they will grow faster. If you plant them with seeds, they're not very competitive. Plant them with transplants, they grow quite fast and make a nice canopy and shade the ground. Yeah.
Well, I've heard people say that you could, I haven't done this because I've done the stale, I do the stale and I'm cheap. So I do the stale planting, or stale.
Stale seed bed?
Yeah,
Mhm.
but I've heard people say put down a bag of potting soil over the soil and plant your seeds in the potting soil, and then it's weed free. And so eventually the seeds will the weed seeds might come up through that, but it'll give you time.
I actually, I've seen that a couple times. Essentially, they don't even put the potting soil down. They just take a bag of potting soil and punch a couple holes in it. Oh, okay, and just put that on the ground and water do that too. So, yeah. Okay. And then I saw another guy, he was trying to sell this, I don't know how far he got, but he had like potting soil in a paper bag so that you do the same thing. You punch the holes in the paper bag and then plant in that, and then again, as the paper disintegrates, then you don't have to worry about the plastic like that. You can probably make it yourself. He was selling it, I think, for like $20. But yeah, okay. All right. Now with biocontrol, I just want to just touch on that. There's a couple of biocontrols for weeds. For the kind of weeds that you'd have in vegetable or landscape, they probably wouldn't be a big factor. This is for Puncture Vine, which is a low-growing weed. We're starting to see that now. It's got a weevil. It's the same genus. One grows in the stem, and the other one eats the seeds. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. Actually, if you have these geese, ducks, or chickens, they do really well for like nutsedge. They really like to go and forage and pick those things out. They also like snails, apparently, too. If you have that. Okay. And then for aquatic weeds, there is this triploid carp that's not supposed to. It's very aggressive fish. I mean, if you get it will eat a lot of the plants that are in a lake or a pond. So they really need to contain it. And so you can only get it in one place, and sometimes you can't get it at all. I think it's in Fife. It's one of the water districts. And they have to come out and inspect your pond, and then they tell you how many you can get and all that kind of stuff. And then they actually take a little clipping of the fin of the fish, and they keep it as they code it for the DNA. And then if they happen to find one that's outside of the pond somewhere, they catch it, then they can trace it back to wherever it came. So, yeah. Okay. All right. So. Okay. So we talked a little bit about herbicides. So herbicide is just something that's used to kill plants, right? Okay, it's a type of pesticide. Some people separate out pesticides and herbicides, but pesticides just an umbrella term that's for insecticides, fungicides, herbicides, rodenticides. Everything's a pesticide. Okay, so here we go. So which ones of these? What's the most correct answer?
Oh, we do this.
Use your clicker. Use your clicker. Pesticide only kills plants you don't want. Cannot be used if you're growing organically. 5, 4, 3, dos. Okay, let's see what you guys say. Okay, about half of you said it's pesticide. Some of you say it only kills plants you don't want. And then actually, a good number of people said it can't be used if you're growing organically. So let's go over this, actually. So it is a pesticide. I just said that, right? So yes, that's true. Herbicide is a pesticide. A herbicide doesn't know, okay? If a herbicide is designed to kill broadleaf plants and you spray it over your roses when you want to kill clover, and you come back and say, well, I wanted to keep the roses, I just wanted to kill the clover. What happened? I can actually get my money back. It's not the fault of the herbicide. It's your own fault because a herbicide does not know what you want to keep and what you don't. It only can work on specific kinds of plants. Okay? They shouldn't call it a weed killer. They should call it a plant killer. You know, most common terms people say it's a weed killer, but it's just a plant killer. Right? And then I put this in because I think a lot of people have a misconception about what kind of things can be used in organic growing. So some of you said you can't use a herbicide if you're growing organically. When in fact you can use, there's a number of pesticides that are registered for organic production and use. Okay? So a pesticide is anything that's used to kill a pest. Okay? So there are a lot of organic herbicides. Okay? The ones like made out of the vinegar type things. There's ones made out of plant oils, lemongrass oil, clove oil. Okay? So those are all pesticides. They're all herbicides, but they also have organic registration. Same with a number of insecticides. There's a lot of the neem oil types. Some of them are registered organic, yet you can use them, but they're still considered pesticides. Okay? So just because something's grown organically or registered, or it says this is certified organic, does not mean that it doesn't have pesticides applied to it. Okay? Is that clear? Yeah.
I think I chose that because somewhere, or maybe I'm just hallucinating, somewhere I read that you're not to use anything on your vegetable garden, any herbicides. Did I? That's late night reading. Okay.
So now there might be, for the synthetic herbicides, for pre-emergent, there's only one registered pre-emergent herbicide for home gardening that you can use. So that might be. What is it? What's the herbicide?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I mean that may be something, but certainly there are herbicides that can be used, or any kind of pesticide, or there's a number of pesticides that you can use for organic production. Okay.
Yeah, but if it's A, it can't be B and C. You don't have D is A and C.
What?
So you have to say A.
Right, A is the correct answer.
B and C.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I'm just talking about that. So, yeah. this is wrong. And this is wrong.
And that's right.
So the correct answer is a herbicide. But I did want to make this clear about the use of pesticides in organic production because it's a big misnomer. I've had numerous people come up to me and they say, I want to, kill, I have problems with X, Y, and Z in my garden, and I say, well, you can use this as a spray. And primarily for insects, I say you can use like a soap or oil, and they say, well, I don't want to use any kind of pesticides or something like that. So these are actually organic. You can use it.
So, if I understand correctly, pesticides, there are two different types. There are herbicides made from plants and chemical pesticides. Chemical can't be used in the organic garden, but the herbicides can because they're plant-based.
Well, I think you're getting a little mixed up there.
Okay.
Herbicides are any material that is used to kill the plant. Okay, some are synthetic,
Okay.
some are plant-based, and some are from other things. Okay.
Then now I'm mistaking on herbicide, thinking
Okay.
it was plant-based.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So
Kills plants
yeah.
Okay.
Right.
rather than insects.
Right.
Okay. So just keep it.
Sulfur.
Yeah. Boy, you're really getting rough on him. Leave him alone. You just asked him a question. Don't you want him to come back next week?
Where does an insecticide fall under pesticide?
Okay, so she asked me a question. She says, where does insecticide come in? Insecticide is a type of pesticide.
So pesticide's a more generic category.
Right. But many people just, for whatever reason, they just consider pesticide insecticide.
Okay, then under herbicide, are there organic versus
Right.
chemical?
Every
But
type of-
what are their names? Do
What-
they go by?
Oh, so like, well, I'll show you something here. So these are some ones that are organic types.
And what is 2,4-D?
2,4-D, you just asked that.
That's the bad one.
I hear a voice, I can't see somebody, I can't see their lips moving. So,
That's princess. We're throwing our voices.
oh, you asked about 2,4-D.
Lauren,
Oh, okay. So 2,4-D.
Lips.
So 2,4-D is a synthetic herbicide, but it mimics a plant growth regulator. Okay, so it stands for 2,4-dichlorophenoxyacetic acid. They call them phenoxy herbicides. Okay, because the phenoxy part of the molecule causes the twisting and the auxin-like growth, and the auxin is what kind of disturbs the way the plant grows. Okay, so that's a synthetic herbicide. But it mimics a natural part. Okay. Any other questions? And it just works primarily on broadleaf plants. All right. So these are some natural herbicides. I'm not saying that they're organic. I can't remember what's on the label, but they are, come from. So burnout is that's a clove oil. Matran, Metarac, that's a clove oil. Weed Zap obviously is acetic acid, which is like vinegar but stronger. And Green Match is lemongrass oil. They're all non-selective, so whatever you spray them on, it's going to kill. They don't move through the plant, so you have to cover the whole plant if you want to kill the whole plant. So it's much better to use on small plants than big ones because you just use less material. Okay. And then there's no residual activity. So not a pre-emergent, it's just a post-emergent herbicide, which means it only works after the plants emerge from the soil, as opposed to pre-emergent, which are the kind that you would use for killing seeds as they germinate. So let me just kind of show you the activity that you would get. So this is one called bioganic. Eugenol is it's the active ingredient that's in clove oil. So eugenol is part of the components of clove oil, but that's the part that makes it a herbicide. So I just took some and I sprayed a place on my yard, just grass. So this is what it looked like right after I sprayed it. This is 1 hour later, 2 hours, and keep in mind this is mostly in the sun. 14 hours, this is the next day, and this is after 3 days. So you can see it works pretty fast. Right? But keep in mind, this is on grass, and it's a contact herbicide. So what would you expect this would look like after about 3 weeks? Anybody? It looks like grass again. It's like the grass grows back.
Oh, does it kill it?
What's that? No, because grass, unless you can get the meristem, the tip, and this is why I told a couple people here today, that's why you can mow grass and it keeps coming back, because the growth tip is hidden. You're not killing that.
What is it about clove oil that actually causes that?
So the thought is that the clove oil disrupts the cell membrane and dissolves it. So it essentially strips it, and then the plant dries out. You might see a lot of times, like I'm sure you've seen those citrus oil things for clean your hair and some grease and so forth. So plant leaves have a layer of wax on them. And so essentially it removes that wax layer and causes desiccation. That's one mode of action. Another mode of action, in some cases, and again, this one may or may not have that one, is it actually enters the cell, causes the cell membrane to break down because it dissolves the lipid layer surrounding that cell, and then the cells leak out, the cell contents leak out. And that's why it works so quickly between those. And it has to be, again, in high sunlight it works best. Okay? So, and then, let's see, here's my little time lapse. It's the same thing, but I just thought it was cool to do it. Okay. So, all right, 1 hour or 2 hours. There. Okay. Yeah, and then I stopped. I didn't do it later. Okay. But just to kind of show you that. So that's the kind of stuff that what you'd expect from these organic type or plant-based type herbicides. It's good. It's great for small broadleaf plants because those type of plants aren't going to regrow after you kill them. Okay, but grass will. Okay. And then some people say, well, how does that work compared to Roundup, for example? So this, I can't remember. I think this is one of my trials. So here's what it looks like, right? Like a couple weeks after I sprayed it. This is one of those eugenol-based, clove oil-based herbicides. As you can see, there is some control, right? But then this is Roundup, and the reason Roundup's so effective is because it's translocated through the plant. So if you want sort of broad spectrum, long-term control, then Roundup's what you want to use. But if you're happy with that, or if you want to do repeated applications, you can get to that point. It's just going to take a couple more applications. Okay, and then let's try a couple things here.
I know that.
Yeah, let's see. We're almost done. So just take a guess with your clicker. What do you think this is? There it is. This is just coming up. This is a seedling coming up here. The green Kylinga, yellow nutsack, Bermuda grass. Just take a guess. I know. 5, 4, 3, 2. See what your guesses are. Yellow nutsack. That's good. That's what it is. Okay. Yes. All right. Green Kylinga's related to yellow nutsack. Okay. But we'll see some. Okay. And then some people thought of Bermuda grass, but Bermuda grass would not be quite as robust as this is, I guess. All right, let's see. I think there it's nice. Okay, let's try this one.
Purple or yellow.
Are we still guessing?
Yeah, still guessing. It's not Jeopardy. You're not going to win anymore. Okay. Okay, yellow nutsack, green Kylinga, or purple nutsack. Okay. Let's see what we got. Okay, so most people realize it wasn't the same thing as it was before. And this is, in fact, green Kylinga. It again, and it is related to the yellow nutsedge. But you see this flower head here? Okay, so that's one of the ways that you can kind of tell if you're just looking at it. It looks more like, to me, it looks like a little pineapple when you're up there. But let's go back. See this flower head? And remember I said purple nutsedge, it looks a little bit more purple. So purple nutsedge will look like that, except a little bit redder. So that's why, your guess, would have been green Kylinga. Okay? Okay. So then just to kind of remind you about the website, okay, we're using ucanr.edu. Sometimes it might pop up if you've got it in your browser as ipm.ucdavis.edu, but we're trying to move people into using it as ipm.ucanr.edu. So if you're giving that website out to people, try and remember to use that one. I think some of the cards that you give out probably have the UC Davis address on it. And just to let you know, the reason why is because University of California's Agricultural and Natural Resources is now sort of like a virtual campus, and so we want to distinguish ourselves from Davis. Okay. So this isn't something from the Davis campus. It's actually located on the Davis campus, but it's actually from the Agricultural and Natural Resources Division. So when you, if you can, try and use it like that. Okay. So
That was awesome.
all right. So now we're going to go outside for a few minutes. Okay. And then we're going to come back to a little testing.